Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Immolation. This is an old school death metal band coming from New York. Really excited to be talking about this band. I will be reviewing every record as well as ranking them, talking about some brief band history, and showing off all of the physical vinyls I have from my collection, including some really dope picture discs, including some picture discs. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and get started. Immolation first began around the late 1980s in Yonkers, New York City, with original band members Ross Dolan on vocals and bass, Rob Vigna on lead guitar, and Tom Wilkinson on rhythm guitar. The first demos featured Neil Bobak on drums, but he was soon replaced with Craig Smilowski prior to the recording of their first LP. They released two influential demos that helped them gain underground recognition and secure a deal with Roadrunner Records. Most of these earlier demos feature the same songs, specifically Internal Decadence, Burial Grounds, and Despondent Souls, all of which would make the final track listing on their debut record, Dawn of Possession. Dawn of Possession was released in 1991 under Roadrunner's original name, RC Records, and was recorded at Music Lab Studios in Berlin, Germany, with producer Harris Johns, whose previous track record includes Sodom's sophomore record from 1987, Persecution Mania. The decision to record overseas was unusual for a debut band and showcased Roadrunner's investment in their potential, despite the band's limited resources. Immolation wanted to create a unique sound for their record that was different to other US-based recording studios that were popular during this time, such as More Sound Studios down in Florida. Many of the Immolation musicians were inspired by bands such as Voivod and Sodom, so they were hoping to incorporate some of that sound into theirs. This album laid the stylistic foundation of technical, dissonant, and brutal death metal that was later hugely influential. So if you're interested in seeing the physical copies that I have for Immolation, I will be posting photos for each record just so you can see what the cover looks like as well as the vinyl variant that we have in the collection. So the overall sound for this record, I would definitely say, is heavy, unforgiving, and brutal. It's an album that is definitely based, in my opinion, on death thrash. So in terms of the performance and the production, I would definitely say Ross Dolan's voice is very high in the mix here. I think he does a really good job vocally. He's a very good enunciator when he's singing. They're not really doing anything super flashy here. I mean, it is like basic instrumentation as a whole, you know. There's some good strong riffs here. I feel like the drums sound really solid, but like I said, they're not doing too much and they're not doing too little. It's like right in the perfect spot. It's very balanced as a whole. And then my two favorite songs. Those Left Behind is a really standout track for me because it's kind of mid-tempo, but I also feel like it manages to stay dynamic and surprising. And then Internal Decadence, I think that this stands out as kind of a faster, more chaotic moment on the record, and I really liked that. I felt like it was a great contrast in terms of like pacing and energy for the whole record. My final thoughts for this record is I feel like this album was very intentional. I feel like they definitely had a vision, and there was nothing really thrown in for show. So yes, they were kind of working with more of a standard setup band-wise, but in terms of the instrumentation, it's like even though they had like the standard setup, they brought something that was controlled and something that was intentional. Every note had a purpose, and it was a very sincere and well-crafted album. That's kind of the gist of what I got. It was fun and more of a death thrash kind of at its core. So overall, I gave this an 8.5. So after the debut, Immolation parted ways with Roadrunner in a move that some people thought was controversial because Roadrunner allegedly dropped many of their death metal bands at the time. They soon signed with Metal Blade Records, who also had Cannibal Corpse under contract and who Immolation was really good friends with. There would be a 5-year hiatus from Immolation's debut record to their sophomore record. And Ross mentions that this record took them a really long time to create. Part of this this, I feel like, is because musicians were weird. We're weird. We get very overwhelmed fast with just all of our creative ideas. Sometimes it's hard to, you know, center yourself. So I feel like creatively, and probably mentally and emotionally, they were feeling a little overwhelmed and lost and trying to figure out like which direction they were going for this next record. So Immolation would then go on to record their sophomore record, Here and After, and this would be recorded at Water Music Studios in Hoboken, New Jersey. Ross mentions that it was a tour that Immolation did with Cannibal Corpse after the release of Here and After that really inspired their love for music again. So now we're going to talk about Here and After, okay? I have 2 copies of this vinyl to show you. So, and like I said, I'll have pictures, but the first is just the original copy of this record. So Here and After was released in 1996. I have a lot of favorite tracks for this album. Here and After, the title track, Nailed to Gold, Burn with Jesus, Away with God, Towards Earth, and then I also want to shout out Christ's Cage. This is the final track on the album. Girl, the opening riff for this song, delightful. So the overall sound, I would say immediately this was a more aggressive and faster paced album than Dawn of Possession. I mean, remember, this record came out 5 years later. There were immediate blast beats that opened up this record with Nailed to Gold. So it was just like immediately jumping into the pit, essentially. This record also leans heavily into this more chaotic and technical guitar work. It's in the sound, it's in the riffs. It is just kind of crazy. It's definitely a chaotic record. The mid-tempo grooves that we felt in Dawn of Possession aren't really seen here. It's definitely an album that is more relentless and has a lot more speed and dissonance to it. And I think that's the best way to describe this like change with Immolation. The solo on Nailed to God 2 almost sounds like a violin. It's very fluid, it's eerie. And then I would say there's also more experimentation. You have odd time signatures here. You have some odd song structures. Like, they just really played around with a lot of different things here in comparison to their debut. Towards Earth features group chants, which kind of add this ritualistic feel to it. And I also think Ross's vocals are very articulate. He's just a solid vocalist all around. So I think if you know Immolation, you already know how Ross's vocals are. For the production, I would say it's definitely a step up from the debut. It's cleaner, like it feels more polished, but it's not in a bad way. It's not overproduced. It's more polished, but it still has a raw sound to it. There's as I said, lots of guitar wankery, but it's balanced in places, and it's definitely a more technical and experimental record. It is for sure an album that focuses on dissonance and keeping you on the edge of your seat, not making you comfortable. And I feel like they throw a lot at you with this record. So I do think it's a strong follow-up from Dawn of Possession, especially after a 5-year hiatus. But personally for me, I do prefer Dawn of Possession, but I blame that on the fact that I started with Floridian death metal. Like, if you've been watching me for a long time, you know Cannibal Corpse is the first metal band I ever listened to. So that's my safe space is Floridian death metal. That's what gets my juices flowing. I'm sorry. So I think it's a solid record. It's got some standout moments, but I did give it a 7.5 out of 10. I would put it in the worth buying tier. Following the release of Here and After, drummer Craig Smolowski was replaced by Alex Hernandez, a move that aligned with the band's evolving sound. Failures for Gods would be recorded at Millbrook Sound Studios in New York, and would be the main studio Immolation would record the rest of their discography, give or take an album or two. This would also mark the first album that would be engineered by a gentleman named Paul Orofino from New York, who from this point forward would engineer, master, and produce every Immolation record following Failures for Gods. All right, girl. You already know the biz. I got me the photos for you to see. So here's the picture disc, also from Hell's Headbangers. I mean, God. Can we just talk about how gorgeous those are? Check the photos, girls. This record came out in 1999. Favorite tracks: Once Ordained, No Jesus, No Beast, Stench of High Heaven, Unsaved, and then I also loved the fade out in Your Angel Died, and then there's a pause right before The Devil and I Know, and I thought that that was super cool. So for your reference, that's track 7 and going into track 8 before that's on side B, so that's right before the album ends. I thought that that was very, very cool. We are back to this kind of mid-tempo classic death metal sound. It's definitely paying homage to Dawn of Possession era Immolation. Would also say atmosphere, girl. This feels like I'm in the cover of this record. It literally feels like I am walking through a post-apocalyptic hellscape. It feels evil. It feels apocalyptic. It feels like doom. I don't know how else to describe it. It is absolutely an atmospheric record. It is villain energy all throughout this, and the guitar riffs, especially in the second half. It's very...
The gods be failing, girl. The gods be failing.
Stench of High Heaven features this really refreshing mini drum solo. Love a good drum solo. Love a good bass solo. I feel like we don't get enough of those. Great use of space and pacing throughout this record. And the guitars are gnarly. So we're definitely flirting with tech death here. I feel like this is where Immolation really found their ideal sound and really found their ideal balance between the atmosphere, the dissonance, the speed, the technical death elements, this chaotic feel. Like, this is really where they kind of figured it out. And then of course they introduced the mid-tempo sound back. They bring that back from their Dawn of Possession days. So it's heavy, it's got groove, it's chaos, it's atmosphere, it's all dialed in. And so I think that this is definitely one of their stronger records, and it's definitely in the pocket. And at this point, this is where I really began to kind of see Immolation more as a tech death band than anything else. And so I don't know how y'all feel about this, but I genuinely believe that Immolation is a tech death band. I think that they are one of the original, like, OGs of tech death, and I think they just never got the label for it personally, because this is not, to me, this is not just regular old death metal. OG death metal, girl, that's Cannibal Corpse, that's Deicide. Granted, it's, you know, thrash core, right? But there's just something, like, I don't know. there is something that Immolation unlocked with their sound, girl, and it's working. It's way more than just like your standard death metal. So I definitely think this is a old school OG tech death band that just never got the label. And this is the album that I really feel like they found their sound, and it's just in the pocket. So I did give this an 8.5, and I put it in the Yas Queen Slay tier. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Close to a World Below. Okay, bestie. I do have the picture disc. Again, Hell's Headbangers for this little dude. This is not my favorite picture disc out of the three. But I do still like it. I like the colors, but I honestly feel like I don't know. Here and After or Failures for God might be one of my favorite tracks on here. I've got Higher Coward, Father, You're Not a Father, and Furthest from the Truth. Let me just tell you something. Alex Hernandez, the drummer on this record, phenomenal work. Literally, I think this is his best record. I don't know personally if they topped the drumming on any of their other records, because it was just that good. This record feels like I'm just slamming my head against the wall for 40 minutes in the best way possible. It's heavy and tight. It feels like a very intentional and polished record. This is literally like Failures for Gods, but 10 times better. It is like they figured out their sound with Failures for Gods, and then they tightened everything that was probably wrong with that record and made this, and it is so good. I think that this is possibly their heaviest album to date. This record is very blasphemous and precise. That's kind of a great way to describe it. Blasphemous and precise. If you're not prepared for it, Immolation might be one of those bands where you have to give their records a lot of listens to be able to really unpack everything that they're unfolding for you, you know, because they're just throwing so much at the wall and it's all sticking, and it is a very heavy, brutal project. So this is a polished, ferocious record that is just beautifully produced. Every instrument is balanced, every instrument you can hear, and nothing is like too high or too low. Alex Hernandez is the most standout part for this record. Absolutely, 100%. I think this is their most refined and aggressive record that they have to date, even after everything else. So I did give this record a 9 out of 10, and I put it in the That Is So Fetch tier. Guitarist Tom Wilkinson would leave Immolation in 2001, and Bill Taylor would join, contributing to both studio work and touring. Unholy Cult was released in 2002 and was highly praised, earning a place in Decibel's Hall of Fame, emphasizing the album's significance in death metal. This was also the first record under Immolation's new record contract with Listenable Records, having mutually departed ways with Metal Blade when it was time to renew their contract. So let's talk about Unholy Cult from 2002. This is just a black vinyl, as you'll see in the pictures. Not a huge fan of this album cover, honestly. I didn't even know what was like in the cross here until I really looked at it in the light. So not a huge fan of it. I think they've had better art styles, but that's okay. My favorite tracks off of this album were Sinful Nature, Unholy Cult, the title track, Reluctant Messiah, and Rival the Imminent. This record made me really feel like Immolation shares a lot of similarities with Nile, and some of y'all may not feel that way, but I genuinely feel like they share a lot of similarities in terms of the structure and the intensity. It just obviously doesn't have the Egyptian, Middle Eastern flair that Nile has, but it has that atmosphere, and it has the technical changes, the, you know, time signature changes, the wacky riffs. You know, I feel like Nile and Immolation share a lot. They have a lot of similarities, but just two different vibes. We're definitely still bordering tech death. I'm just going to say that they're a tech death band 100%. Like that is just what I genuinely feel. I don't care if it's wrong. I really don't. I think that Immolation is a tech death band that just never got the damn label. The B-side is stronger on this record. I will say the first, like the A-side, I feel like was just kind of there, just kind of existing. It didn't really have anything that like super stood out to me. B-side, I feel like I emotionally connected to more, had more energy. I really liked Reluctant Messiah because it showcased a lot of really insane drum work. Rival the Imminent ended with a killer riff that I really enjoyed. Like their previous records, it builds this nice soundscape, this atmosphere, this dissonance, this feeling of dread and doom. You get that with this record. So I do think that that's really cool. It is a visual listening experience. If you're somebody that is a visual listener with music, this is the vibe. So it's like seeing chaos unfold. It's like you're witnessing, 2012, the movie, but it's like in hell or something like that. I do think that this album demands multiple listens. That may be the only fault really of Immolation, is that they are giving you so much that it might take a few listens to unpack. And so I think that this is one of those records for sure that a listener would have to probably listen to it multiple times to really get the vibe of it, get the gist. You may be different though. I know I have some people in my Discord that are not like that. They listened to it one time and got it. So everybody's different. But I think that this is an experimental, strong record, but not as strong as Close to a World Below. So I did give it a 7 out of 10. And put it in the worth buying tier. After the release of Unholy Cult, Alex Hernandez would ultimately leave the band due to health issues. In a 2012 interview Alex did with Sick Drummer, he said it was a combination of things. There were some serious health issues that developed in 2003, halfway through the European tour of Unholy Cult with Cradle and later Marduk. It was a long and brutal 3 months that left me with some potentially serious health-related issues that needed to be addressed. The physical toll that is required to perform night after night didn't help matters. Upon arriving back in the States, I immediately saw my physician and learned that surgery was required. Steve Shalati would step in as Immolation's new drummer and continue to be their drummer to this day. So Harnessing Ruin, Bestie from 2005. Not a fan of this record, I'll be honest. Not a fan. I did not have any favorite tracks. I didn't have any favorite tracks on this album. Unfortunately, there was nothing here that like stood out for me. The overall vibe. So this was definitely a more relaxed record than their previous projects. I felt like we did not have much of that disjointed, anxiety-inducing tone. Of course, lacked atmosphere, in my opinion. There was very little build-up and very little payoff in the end. The songs tend to meander and they felt like they were taking too long to get to the point. It just felt like a very safe and tame record for me. It's like, where's the chaos? Where's the experimentation? Where is the energy and the tone to make it feel like we are about to burn in hell? There was a track on here that had whispered vocals that I feel like really dated the album. I mean, it's from 2005, so I don't really know how else to explain it, but it felt dated and it felt like it didn't add anything. It was a little cringy. So for these reasons, I did give Harnessing Ruin a 6 out of 10 and put it in the good background tier. Okay, so let's talk about Shadows in the Light. This is on a limited Fire Splatter vinyl, which I will show pictures of. Number 183 out of 444. This record came out in 2007. I do have favorite tracks on here. Passion Killed, World Agony, Breathing in the Dark, and the title track is a total freaking banger. Absolutely love it. Overall sound, this is a more groove-oriented album, and it was much easier to digest than their previous record for sure, but then also their more chaotic pieces of work that they have in their catalog before this. Some people could see this record as a step back for their overall sound because it is a more simplified record, but simplicity works in some cases, and I feel like it works for me. I gave this record an 8 out of 10 for how fun it was. So I put it in the Yas Queen Slay tier. Let's talk about Majesty and Decay. This record was released in 2010 and was also the first record that was released under Nuclear Blast, which is the same record label that they are still signed under today. Majesty and Decay, let's talk about my favorite tracks for this record. The title track, really great. A Glorious Epic or Epoch. I think it's Epic. A Thunderous Consequence, and then The Rapture of Ghosts. The opening riff on that song, nasty, gorgeous, love it, tasty, tasty. Overall sound and vibes. This is a dark, apocalyptic sounding record with very strong atmosphere, almost cinematic at times. It includes instrumental interludes, which is the intro and then track 8. These really heighten this kind of like doomsday vibe. Bass is a bit buried, unfortunately. I think that that's like the only production flaw that I really heard. I think this was also a record that made me really consider Immolation being ahead of its time. It's just a band that's consistently innovating and evolving and trying new things. I would give this an 8 out of 10, and I put it in the Yas Queen Slay tier. 3 years later, we get Immolation's 2013 record, Kingdom of Conspiracy, on a white vinyl. I think, and this might just be a personal thing, I don't think I'm a fan of white vinyl. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of white vinyl. It just doesn't do anything for me. It works for Destroyer 666 debut record. I don't remember the name of it. I'm terrible at album names. But that record, it works because it's kind of snow vibes. But I don't know. It doesn't really work for me for this. Now, some people think that this album cover like looks like garbage. I don't necessarily mind it. But this record, 2013, I do have some favorite tracks on this. The title track, Kingdom of Conspiracy, Bound to Order, Keep the Silence, Echoes of Despair. I really liked The Great Sleep. I felt like that was a groovy banger. And then A Spectacle of Lies, I also really liked. So this definitely continues Immolation's simplistically based death metal. Yeah, modern mid-tempo death metal sound that they're exploring. They definitely are going more into this like safer pocket, which again, I mentioned some people might not really like this direction that Immolation is going with these mid discography albums words. I do feel like it was a tight and clean produced record. At some points it is a little too clean for me, to the point where the production is just very sterile. And I do feel like because of that, the atmosphere definitely lacks. So we're not building up any sort of tension here. We're not building any sort of soundscape. It feels more like a typical death metal record and less like an Immolation album with all of this, dissonance to it. Ross's vocals, of course, are the weight to this record. It really, he's just a great vocalist. I'll say it again. He's powerful, he's engaging, he's got a lot of energy. He's fun to see live, especially with the flowing hair. So Steve's riffs are really solid. They do, however, start to feel a little bit repetitive, especially in Bound to Order, which I feel like is just kind of a rinse and repeat sounding song in terms of the riffage. So you could say that this is like kind of like an Amon Amarth style record, they're just rinse and repeating some of the same riffs. It feels very accessible, very straightforward, and less inspired than their previous records. I feel like this record would have benefited a lot from having more atmospheric layering and just a little bit grittier production, just a little bit more oomph. I feel like this is kind of just like, not necessarily a contractual obligation, but it's just like it doesn't feel like they really had a lot that inspired them for this record. So I did give this a 7.5 out of 10 and put it in the worth buying tier. All right, let's talk about Immolation's second to last record from 2017. This is Atonement. Now, the album cover was created by a Polish artist. I'm going to absolutely butcher this name, so feel free to make fun of me if you want to. Zbigniew Bilak? Girl, I don't know. He also created the artwork for Torn Arteries. Also not a fan of this green color, but that's okay, because this record's still a banger. So Atonement came out, like I said, in 2017. I have favorite tracks. The Distorting Light, When the Jackals Come, Rise the Heretics, the title track, and Above All. So let's talk about the overall sound, the production on this record. It's definitely a clean and polished production. You can hear all of the instruments separately. It again leans more towards that straightforward death metal sound, less technicality, but it's well paced. And it does have some atmospheric moments as well. It's not groundbreaking, but I felt like it was solid and cohesive to listen to. But there are some really great buildups in the atmosphere, especially in songs like When the Jackals Come. Rise of the Heretics features a really cool riff in the verses, which I really liked. It's more simplistic, but I ain't necessarily mad about it, girl. This was a safe but solid record for sure. I feel like it fits well with Immolation's sort of modern death metal style. So I did give this a 8 out of 10, and I put it in the Yas Queen Slay tier. We are finally at the end of the Immolation dive with their 2022 album, Acts of God. I love the vinyl and the cover of this record. I'll show the pictures, but I really like this art style. I love a good oil painting, or like a good album cover that looks like an oil painting. I've talked about this before. I really like this vinyl too. It kind of makes me think of like amoebas in a petri dish. It's a bone and beer swirl with violet splatter, limited to 1,000 copies. Super pretty. Really like it. Let's talk about this album. Did I have any favorite tracks? No, I did not, unfortunately. I'm gonna be honest, I did not like this record very much at all. The album length is a bit too long for me. It's 52 minutes long, and some tracks really feel like they drag. Now, a lot of people bitch and moan and complain because they think I don't like long songs or long albums, and that's not true. I just think it is very, very difficult for bands to have good albums and good songs that are really, really long. For me personally, like it has got to be an epic ballad with a, chapters, a beginning, middle, and end, characters falling in love and dying, and like, you know what I mean? Like instrumentally, in order for it to feel worth the time. And that's not me being a TikTok brainer, okay? Okay? I may listen to a lot of gore grind and grindcore, girl, but I can still make it through a long album. That all to say, 52 minutes, it's too long. It's too long for this record. The songs drag. They're still sticking with that simplistic death metal approach, but in comparison to the previous records that have that approach, there's nothing here that sticks for me. All the riffs and melodies blend together and just kind of lack diversity, and nothing sticks with you. And I just feel like there aren't any standout moments for me on this album. It felt like a very safe and uninspired record that was not pushing any boundaries or trying to set up atmosphere or trying to make the listener feel any sort of uncomfortable emotions or dissonance or fun grooves or anything. It just felt like it was there. It was just existing, and it was borderline a contractual agreement. So I did give it a 5 out of 10 and put it in the doorstop tier. I know. Very unfortunate, honestly. An unfortunate ending, but this is my tier list for Immolation. Immolation is definitely a cool band. I've seen them twice now, and every time I need to ask Ross, like, what his hair care. Not that I care, but it's like, girl, have you seen Ross's hair? It's like past his ass, girl. It's like, how do you get it to be that shiny, that long? You know, I bet it gets caught in everything. So yeah, let me know down below in the comments what you think about Immolation. What's your favorite record? Tell me your top 3 favorite Immolation records. And yeah, thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, you guys.